friends, and welcome to the Asian Voices Radio podcast, where you'll find real Asian American conversations, including all those topics you are too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm your host, Melissa May, and my guest joining us today is an Asian American airline pilot, the first ever on this podcast. He is also the founder and president of a nonprofit organization called Professional Asian Pilots Association, better known as PAPA. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome Harley Pasiderio to Asian Voices Radio. Welcome, Harley. Thank you for grounding yourself for a bit to join us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk and be part of your podcast.
So tell us a little bit about your life growing up in the U.S. I believe the conversation we had beforehand, you're the first of your family to be born in the U.S. And when did your parents immigrate to the U.S. from the Philippines?
That's correct. I was the firstborn from my family in the United States. They actually immigrated in the early 70s. My dad with the Navy, and then my mom shortly after. He was recruited out there in the Philippines, along with a lot of other Filipinos. Because of that, I ended up in these towns, Navy towns, with huge, Filipino populations and a sense of community within the Filipino, family there. I'm from San Diego, born and raised. Again, one of four, three sisters. I've been an airline pilot for about 12 years now. I've been flying since I was 14, so that was 1994, and it was through a program in my high school that actually offered, flying opportunities, flying lessons in ground school. It was actually a magnet program where you could either build an aircraft, similar to shop where you work on a car, but each class worked on building an aircraft and contributing to building this plane. The other was aerospace engineering, and then the flying portion, which what I was really interested in. And I became interested in flying because my parents being from the Philippines, one year we went back to their hometown, and it was that international flight. Actually, it was the first flight, the international connection from San Diego to LAX that did it for me. The acceleration and being up there and thinking, wow, you can actually do this for a living and be able to make this a career. And so everything I've done up until this point was to get me to there. So yeah, I've been an airline pilot now, like I said, for about 12 years, and there's things I've seen in the industry which, I wasn't really oblivious to growing up in these mostly populated, Asian populated communities. You know, you never really think about how important that is, I guess you could say. My high school in particular is one of the largest west of the Mississippi, about 2,000 student body, and one year in the yearbook, they printed out a pie chart of the different ethnic backgrounds, and Filipinos happened to, encompass one of the largest chunks of the pie chart. And in addition to that, the typical languages that you are taught, or you have option to choose from, second language in high school, Spanish, French, German. Filipino was actually one of those in my junior high and my high school because that's how prevalent the Filipino population was in my community. And I thought it was a great opportunity to take that along with flying to learn about my culture. And I thought maybe I could get an easy A with my parents helping me with the Filipino language, but it turned out there's about 100 different dialects with 1,000 different islands. You're going to have that many different types of languages. And it turned out they were teaching the very more specific Tagalog and my parents, that's not their strongest dialect there, so I ended up leaving that class with a B, thinking I could get an A. But anyhow, it opened me up to the Filipino culture, and so that was my childhood.
Obviously, coming from a military family, you may have been encouraged by your parents to go into the military, but was it difficult or were there any challenges when you approached your parents telling them that you wanted to become an airline pilot?
Sure, growing up in a military family in in a Navy town, almost every relative I know of was a Navy. Every uncle was a Navy uncle, Navy guy. Some aunties and there were quite a bit of external factors that played into. I was in high school ROTC. the military was all around me. I don't remember shopping at a regular grocery store. It was always at the Navy Exchange or the Navy Commissary, so that's what I was used to. So it was inevitable I was going to go into the military. But in terms of flying, everyone always thought it was a great goal. It was a great, you know, something to set my hopes towards and whatnot. But it's not something that was seen by my parents. It was not something that was represented normally within that community. So, you know, becoming a pilot, there was no one really you could look up to or uh, follow their career path. The typical nurse, doctor, engineer. That's what you're going to be. Traditional Asian household. That seemed to be prevalent. And if I were to ask any relative or my parents how to become a nurse or a doctor, they give me a foolproof plan from high school all the way to college and then some, right? But if I were to ask them how do I be an airline pilot, which I did, the typical response would be join the military. Um, and
It's not cheap
that is a
either.
great career path. Yes, and that is a great career path, and it's been successful for a lot of people, but it's not for everyone. I wouldn't want someone going into the military if they didn't want to be there. So, educating the community about the different paths into aviation was a barrier. For me, after high school, after that program ended, I didn't have the resources to fund that the flight training. So I actually took a break from it. And when I actually became a nuclear power instructor, I was actually um, doing a 9 to 5 job. I actually had a regular schedule. I wasn't going out to sea. I wasn't going out to deployment. So I actually can get back into flight training again, and I used that GI Bill um, to help fund that. But yeah, that's one barrier. Throughout my entire career, there's been multiple barriers. Financially, support from the family, even as a Navy guy getting out, I had a young family, and to make that big career move took a lot of support from, my partner, my wife. We had little ones, and so making that big move, it might be different for some other people who are single and whatnot, but most typical airline pilot careers, you're leaving home for a couple of days. And so if you have something going on at home, you need that support structure. So I definitely wouldn't have been able to make it happen without the support at home. So that is another huge barrier I had to overcome.
Um, Being an airline pilot, maybe it's changed over the years since you started your career, but are there a lot of AAPI, colleagues of yours in your line of work, or do you kind of see more of other races representing airline pilots? And are there any challenges that you face as an Asian American pilot?
No, I'm glad you bring up that it has changed quite a bit. I think my life since high school has always been atypical with the career choices I've chosen. The nuclear world. When I went in, it was not very AAPI prevalent. It's actually I had quite a bit of relatives that asked, "Why did you choose the nuclear field? Filipinos or Asians don't do that." Because you get caught in this cycle. They help each other out with one job, and you tend to go with what you're comfortable with or what's proven successful, and not venture out. And that's something that started with the thing that the nuclear field it wasn't very prevalent then. It's changed now. I guess for people like me that have actually stepped up and tried to, pursue that and show that, there's people like that look like you and I in this career field that can be successful in it. But definitely in the airline community, the whole reason I helped start APAPA, the Professional Asian Pilots Association, was the airline I happened to be working for at the time. There was only a small group of us that, were Asian, and a lot of times we would get other people would get us confused. They would think, oh, you're so and so, or they would ask me about my friend's girlfriend or spouse, but I'm like, oh, that's not me. You're getting me confused with the other Filipino guy that works here. And that kept going on, and one day we were, at a function, sitting around, uh, gathered around, having some drinks, and we looked around. It was all the Asian pilots from our one airline, a majority of us, and we were thinking, wow, this is all of us. We need some representation here because there are actually quite a bit of other, uh, what do you call them, affinity groups out there in the airline world. The Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, National Gay Pilots Association, Latino Pilots Association, Women in Aviation International, and all those groups do great work, but there was nothing representing Asians. And so I thought maybe
Why not?
we should start one. And I threw it out there as just an idea, and as a I want to say as a joke amongst all of us that we should start this. We need some representation. And shortly after, one of the founding directors threw statistics. So this is kind of old at the time. I think in the United States, only 2.5% of airline pilots were of Asian descent, AAPI descent, and um, if you want to break it down into male and female, I don't even think that they were keeping track of it because that number is so minuscule. I don't even think they were keeping track. It's going to even be even smaller in the women's side and the female pilot, Asian pilot side. So with that statistic being thrown out there, I thought, wow, this has got to change. And so for me, going back to growing up in such a prevalent Asian community, I never really thought. All I knew is I wanted to be an airline pilot. It was a passion of mine, but I never really thought about what the work environment or the culture would look like and how that would play into me feeling you know welcome in and my knowledge and my skills being considered. And when I did get into the airline industry, I saw there was a lopsidedness. There wasn't an even, the landscape didn't look very even, to the point where, I'd show up for work with a brand new crew and I'd be let's say I was a captain at the time, one specific example, wearing four gold stripes, the captain hat and everything. And everyone's still thinking I'm the flight attendant because I'm not the typical representation of what, or any kind of bias that most people have of what a typical airline pilot should look like, which is, the gray-haired, older white guy, and I even had a flight attendant ask me once, "Do I know what I'm doing?" And I'm like thinking, to get to this point to sit in the left seat is a very, you know, long process, and it's a very, tedious one, and very involved. So of course I know what I'm doing, but they started to ask that because I wasn't that typical, or what they thought, we as pilots commute, we jump seat quite a bit, and I know there has been a couple of times where when I would go up to the customer service agent to request to jump seat, they would put me down as the flight attendant. So even though I'm in full captain uniform, for some reason in their mind it wasn't registering, that this is an airline pilot. And because it was that landscape has always been predominantly, the typical elder, gray-haired white man, and and it's changed. It's actually changed for the better. I hope to think that Papa had something to do with a little bit of that. The social climate of today is also helping, but you know, uh, it's nice to see that Asians are considering a career field in this industry versus the typical nurse, doctor, engineer, and what have you.
Well, let's roll with that, Harley, and keep talking about Papa. What is its mission and who is involved with it?
Sure. Papa, our blanket mission statement is dedicated to bringing awareness and support to all members of the Asian community in all fields of aviation. We hope to inspire current and prospective professionals towards a fulfilling career in aviation, and we hope to aspire to promote diversity and inclusion in an industry that frankly is underrepresented by many demographics. We were established in 2017. I think I told you earlier, it's a group of pilots just sitting around. So there's 20 of us from a regional airline that a couple airlines ago that's no longer in business. We were just passionate about flying, and what started as a singular group chat between all of us, gradually evolved into a full-fledged organization, connecting, empowering all sorts of individuals who share the same vision to overcome overcome Asian underrepresentation in the aviation industry. Again, what the driving factor for that was that statistic I threw out there, about 2.5% of all certificated airline transport pilots in the United States were, of Asian descent, which is a very small number that we really, would like to see go up. So what started as about 20 of us is developed into over 1,500 members. We give over $500,000 in flight aviation-related scholarships every year. We have a mentorship program. We have 4 collegiate chapters. We are either a partner or sponsored by almost every airline in the United States. And we just hosted one of the biggest job fairs in the airline industry in the US. It was our inaugural event this past July. And we sold out in about 2 hours. We had about 1,000 attendees and over 60 exhibitors, which is quite a bit for the airline industry. If you think about the number of airlines out there in the U.S., I probably can't even count up to name 60. I can't even, but apparently they're out there, and we were the first to implement the Asian culture and aspects of our rich heritage into our event with food, performances. We even opened up with a big dragon dance that kind of blessed the floor, the main exhibit hall, which is not typical of these job fairs or these events that happen every year within the airline industry. So it was a great success, enough to be asked if we could put on 2 a year, which is not happening. One was a big accomplishment as to begin with, and to be asked to do 2 was a compliment, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, but again, it was just my idea, and I think like most airline pilots, we think we could do almost anything as long as we have a great plan and whatnot. But when it comes to like these nonprofit organizations, I think you tend to see that someone with a great vision and an idea isn't always the best person to implement. So I have a team working, to help implement a lot of these visions, these initiatives, because executing them is one thing. To have the idea is one, and to execute them is another. And so we have a board of directors that they're all associated with the airlines in some way. And yeah, so we are still growing, and we hope to be doing more within the airline industry and promoting youth career progression, especially is what we're targeting, so that like the story I shared with you earlier is not being repeated again, where you have the young Filipino guy asking how do I become an airline pilot, and parents being telling them join the military. There's a lot of career paths. That is one of the good ones, but it's not the only one.
And as we were talking about, like, it's very expensive to go to flight school and become a pilot. And you had mentioned that Papa provides scholarships. What are the qualifications, if you remember off the top of your head, for one to receive a scholarship, and how do they apply?
So we offer scholarships to our members. So being a Papa member is one of the requirements. The majority of our scholarships are provided by the different airlines, and so they set their own criteria, but we as an association are part of the selection committee, and help with choosing. Again, one of the biggest things is 18 or over, just we're looking holistically overall, what are we seeing here? What kind of potential as a airline candidate are we going to be sending with this scholarship? Again, it'd be to I don't even have a broad idea of what we're looking for, because every airline sets their own standards. But if you come and visit our website and you see the various scholarships, you can get an idea of what we're looking for each particular one. And in the future, Papa will be also helping with just providing a general scholarship for anything that you may may need to help you through the flight training. So it wouldn't be necessarily geared towards paying for the flying portion of it. So that's something you could look forward to. And we are still setting the criteria for that as well. But we're at that point now where we would like to provide our own scholarship external to the airlines. And so
Wow.
visit the website and you can get an idea from there.
And what's that website?
www.asianpilots.org. We like to keep it really simple there. Asianpilots.org.
That's straightforward.
So,
Well, do you have any wisdom or advice that you'd like to give our listeners, especially the future generations of aspiring pilots that may or may not have parents as supportive of yours, and also those who are considering a career transition to become a pilot or
sure.
flight instructor?
Well, first educate yourself about everything that has to do with the career. Don't let anyone discourage you about it, or let any bias or misconceptions that may come with it affect you. Again, we had mentioned earlier about, or I had mentioned earlier about what that typical representation of an airline pilot that most people think should look like, and that's something we're trying to overcome. So those misconceptions, I think, it's kind of funny that I bring this up, but the movie Maverick, the new one that just came out, if you compare it to the previous one, you see that it's very
A lot more diverse.
diverse, and so I think that's a good sign,
It's great.
But again, seeing that maybe will help encourage others to pursue a career that they otherwise wouldn't consider. In terms of more specifically the technical side of being an airline or becoming a pilot, the first thing you got to work on is getting your private pilot certificate. And I suggest for that is going out to your local airport and taking an introductory flight, or what's known as a discovery flight. And usually there's no strings attached to that. It's basically to show you what flight training is all about. You go up with an instructor for about an hour or two. You might be able to bring a friend or your parent up. What most people know about flying is what they've experienced in the back of an airliner, as a passenger in the cabin. And flight training is, completely different. Even, just being able to see forward versus
Yeah.
out the side of a airline window, is completely different, and
So many
so that might
buttons.
correct. And so just getting a feel for if this is something you actually want to pursue, before actually investing into it with time and other resources. Take that introductory flight, and I don't mean to go out to LAX and go knocking on a door and say, give me an introductory flight. Or we're talking about the smaller fields, most of the smaller airports. Let's say, for example, I say LAX, just go to Torrance instead, or something like that, El Monte or something close by. It's a smaller field. Most small airports have a flight school, or what's known as a fixed base operator, FBO, that offer flight lessons or an introductory flight, and start there. Private pilot certificate's the first thing you got to do, and it's a certificate to continue learning, because once you get that, you can start pursuing other certificates, ratings eventually for different aircraft and whatnot.
And realistically, I know obviously life happens and whatever, but if you consistently do all that you need to do, how long does it take to become or get to the position where you are in terms of years?
So for me, the industry is always changing, especially the airline industry. To become a pilot, let's just say you want to do this recreationally, it doesn't take very long, as long as you're consistent with the flight lessons and you're progressing. It's just like anything. If you're consistently doing it, you're making progress. If you're not keeping up with it, you're always taking a couple steps forward, a couple steps back, right? So the FAA publishes you can get a pilot certificate in as little as 30 to 40 hours. Depending on how you go about doing it, right? And that's just the private pilot certificate. So we're not talking about, flying a big airliner across the ocean or anything like that. So starting there, you can get that certificate in a very short amount of time. But typically, get to my position, I've mentioned most of my career earlier. I've been at my current company now for about 5 years. I started flying when I was 14, but I didn't really get serious about it until about a little over 12 years ago. So it was different then. The industry could be cyclic. It right now is a great time if you were to pursue a career in aviation. Just like any other industry, you have a huge workforce that comes and then needs to retire. There is a mandatory retirement age for airline pilots, which is 65. And so, we're coming up to that point where a lot of airline pilots have been around for decades are hitting that point. So there's a big need. I think most people have been seeing it in the media, in the news, pilot shortages here and there, airlines having to cut back on routes. So right now is a great time. It could be a very short amount of time relative to when I first started to get yourself into the flight deck of an airliner.
What would you say is the most rewarding part of your profession? Those that are maybe just like flying and interested? It seems like you've been very passionate about it from a young age, but what would you say is your most rewarding part of your profession?
Yeah, so for me personally, again, working with various crews has been very rewarding. Being able to, take a plane full of passengers from point A to B and them being very thankful and happy for getting them there safely is very rewarding in itself. But personally, just having a love for aviation and everything flying, being able to do that when I come to work and get paid to do it is a very rewarding thing for me. That I get to see airplanes every day. I get to talk airplane talk. I get to fly an aircraft. Personally, that's very rewarding to me as well. But the accomplishment of taking people to what matters most to them, seeing their loved ones, getting them to a vacation destination, and them being very thankful is there's a sense of accomplishment there too.
I'm probably one of the random people that do this, but I always try as I'm walking off of a plane to look into the cockpit and at least yell a thank you. I'm sure, pilots are busy breaking down what they need to do, but I always try to yell thank you, for getting me there safe. Hopefully you get thank you'd a lot because it is quite an accomplishment to go from point A to point B in an airplane. I don't think people, at least the average person, doesn't understand the difficulty of. I have friends that are airline pilots and they only have their private pilot's license, and just to get that was a lot of time and work and studying. So the fact that you're at the level that you are is leaps and bounds, and it's the fact that you did it as an Asian American without a lot of guidance. You kind of forged your own path, it was pretty amazing. But unfortunately, we are out of time today. I could speak with you. I'm sure the listeners would want to learn a lot more about becoming a pilot. Maybe you even converted some listeners. Hopefully you did, and they're going to join Papa. But before we go, do you have a website or social media handle that our listeners can learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so the website, asianpilots.org, is where you can visit our association's website, and from there you can obviously navigate around and see what we have to offer. In addition to that, our Instagram is Papa Social, and the Facebook page is at Asian Pilots. So asianpilots.org, at Asian Pilots for Facebook, and then Papa Social for our Instagram account.
I love the fact that the acronym is PAPA because it's very memorable. No one will forget Papa. Don't forget Papa. Well, once again, thank you so much, Harley, for sharing your remarkable story here with us on Asian Voices Radio. If you have any suggestions for future guests or topics, we'd love to hear from you. Also, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Asian Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, a nonprofit that empowers our API community with a voice through media arts. If you would like to support our program and make a donation, please visit AsianVoicesRadio.com. Thank you so much all for listening. I'm your host, Melissa May. Please join us again next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices Radio show. Until next time, take care, everyone, and be safe.